I never thought I'd end up living in isolation, hidden from everyone I knew. But to understand how I got here, we need to go back to the man I thought I loved. My name is Sarah. And until recently, my life was what many would call perfect. I lived in New York, that city that never sleeps and makes you feel like anything is possible. I had a dream job at a renowned advertising agency, a charming apartment on the Upper West Side, and a circle of friends who supported me in everything. I was ambitious, career-focused, and felt like I was at the peak of my life. Everything seemed to be in the right place. That's when Mark appeared. We met at a networking event, one of those you go to more out of obligation than desire. I was about to leave, tired of empty conversations, when he approached, tall, with a smile that lit up the room and blue eyes that seemed to see my soul. He was a success in the financial market, spoke with a confidence that was almost palpable, but without being arrogant. On the contrary, he was kind, attentive, and incredibly funny. The conversation flowed in a way I had never experienced before. He made me laugh, truly listened to me, and seemed interested in every detail of my life. That night, we exchanged numbers, and I went home with a strange feeling in my chest. A mix of excitement and a slight premonition that something big was about to happen. And it did. Our romance was a whirlwind. Within a few weeks, we were inseparable. Romantic dinners, strolls through Central Park, charming weekend getaways to country houses. He was everything I ever wanted in a partner. Intelligent, caring, fun, and with an ambition that matched mine. He supported me in every decision, celebrated my achievements, and made me feel like the most special woman in the world. Within 6 months, he proposed. It was in Paris, under the Eiffel Tower, with a diamond ring that sparkled more than the city lights. I cried, of course. I cried with joy, with emotion, with gratitude. I was living a modern fairy tale. My friends were radiant, my parents enchanted with their perfect son-in-law. Mark was the complete package, the man of my dreams. But you know, sometimes, things that seem too perfect hide cracks, and the cracks in our story began to appear so subtly that, at first, I didn't even notice. They were small things, seemingly insignificant details, but over time, they started to accumulate. For example, he almost never talked about his family. I talked about mine all the time, but he always changed the subject when I asked about his parents, siblings, or where he really came from. He said his family was complicated and he preferred not to talk much about the past. I respected that, of course. We all have our traumas, right? But it was strange. He was so open about everything else, except for that, and there was something else, something I couldn't quite pinpoint, but that made me uneasy. A feeling that, behind that perfect smile, there was a secret. And that secret, I would later discover, was much bigger and more dangerous than I could have imagined. Despite trying to ignore those little oddities about Mark, they started to gnaw at me. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch. I found myself observing him more than usual, paying attention to every detail, every movement, every word. And the more I observed, the more questions arose. The feeling that he was hiding something big, became almost unbearable. One night, he was in the shower, and his phone, as always, was in the bathroom with him. But, for some reason, he dropped it on the floor, right near the door. I heard the thud, and my heart pounded. Part of me screamed, not to look, to respect his privacy. But the other part, the part that was tired of living in doubt, pushed me forward. I approached the door and saw the phone on the floor. Its screen lit up. It wasn't the lock screen. It was a text conversation. I couldn't read everything, but I saw a few scattered words that made my blood run cold. Delivery, payment, no witnesses. My blood ran cold. No witnesses. That reminded me of the words I saw on Ethan's phone in Cancun. Was it a chilling coincidence, or something far more sinister? I backed away from the phone as if it were on fire. When Mark came out of the shower, he picked up the phone quickly, without even realizing I had seen anything. He looked at me with his usual smile, and I forced a smile back, trying to appear normal. But inside, I was in a panic. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words delivery, payment, no witnesses echoed in my head. What was he doing? What kind of business was this? And why did he need no witnesses? My mind started creating the worst-case scenarios. I thought of trafficking, organized crime, things I only saw in movies. But now, it seemed like I was living one. The next day, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers, and if Mark wouldn't give them, I would have to find them myself. I knew it was risky, but curiosity and fear were stronger than me. I began my investigation. First, I tried researching his company. He worked at a reputable investment firm, as I said, but when I searched his name associated with it, information was scarce. He had a LinkedIn profile, but it was very superficial, with few connections and not many details about his career. For someone so successful, it was strange. Then, I tried looking for his family. I knew he was from a small town in rural Texas. I started searching for Mark in his last name, along with the town's name. Nothing. No records, no news, nothing linking him to that place. It was as if he didn't exist before New York. With every search, every piece of information that didn't fit, the feeling that I was in a nightmare only grew. Mark wasn't just a man with secrets, he was a ghost. And the question that began pounding in my head, replacing the previous one, was, who are you, Mark? And why are you lying about everything? I was about to discover that the truth was far more terrifying than any lie. Despite trying to ignore it, those small oddities about Mark began to gnaw at me. It was like an unscratchable itch. I found myself observing him more than usual, paying attention to every detail, every movement, every word, and the more I observed, the more questions arose. The feeling that he was hiding something big, became almost unbearable. One night, he was in the shower, and his phone, as always, was in the bathroom with him. But, for some reason, he dropped it on the floor, right near the door. I heard the thud, and my heart pounded. Part of me screamed not to look, to respect his privacy. But the other part, the part that was tired of living in doubt, pushed me forward. I approached the door and saw the phone on the floor. Its screen lit up. It wasn't the lock screen. It was a text conversation. I couldn't read everything, but I saw a few scattered words that made my blood run cold. Delivery, payment, no witnesses. My blood ran cold. No witnesses. That reminded me of the words I saw on Ethan's phone in Cancun. Was it a chilling coincidence, or something far more sinister? I backed away from the phone, as if it were on fire. When Mark came out of the shower, he picked up the phone quickly, without even realizing I had seen anything. He looked at me with his usual smile, and I forced a smile back, trying to appear normal. But inside, I was in a panic. That night, I couldn't sleep. The words delivery, payment, no witnesses echoed in my head. What was he doing? What kind of business was this? And why did he need no witnesses? My mind started creating the worst-case scenarios. I thought of trafficking, organized crime, things I only saw in movies. But now, it seemed like I was living one. The next day, I decided I couldn't ignore it anymore. I needed answers, and if Mark wouldn't give them, I would have to find them myself. I knew it was risky, but curiosity and fear were stronger than me. I began my investigation. First, I tried researching his company. He worked at a reputable investment firm, as I said, but when I searched his name associated with it, information was scarce. He had a LinkedIn profile, but it was very superficial, with few connections and not many details about his career. For someone so successful, it was strange. Then, I tried looking for his family. I knew he was from a small town in rural Texas. I started searching for Mark in his last name, along with the town's name. Nothing. No records, no news, nothing linking him to that place. It was as if he didn't exist before New York. With every search, every piece of information that didn't fit, the feeling that I was in a nightmare only grew. Mark wasn't just a man with secrets, he was a ghost. And the question that began pounding in my head, replacing the previous one, was, who are you, Mark? And why are you lying about everything? I was about to discover that the truth was far more terrifying than any lie. My investigation into Mark became an obsession. I spent hours on my laptop, after he fell asleep, trying to unravel who he really was. I felt like a private detective, but without the badge, and with a growing fear in my stomach. Those words on his phone, delivery, payment, no witnesses, wouldn't leave my mind. I needed more. I decided to dig deeper into the investment firm he supposedly worked for. I used all my research skills, the same ones I used for complex advertising campaigns, but now with a much darker purpose. I started looking for old news about the company, for scandals, for anything that could link Mark to something strange. And that's when I found a small footnote in an old article about a merger. It mentioned a former employee who had mysteriously disappeared years ago, right after a major transaction. The name wasn't Mark, but the case was intriguing. Then, I tried another approach. I started searching for Mark, his last name in Texas, but not the small town he mentioned. I tried larger cities, capitals, looking for any trace, and nothing. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere in New York. That was impossible. No one just erases their past like that, unless there's a very, very strong reason. Paranoia began to set in. I found myself looking at people on the street, wondering if someone was following me. Every noise in the apartment, every creak, made me jump. I knew I was taking a risk, but I couldn't stop. The need to know the truth was stronger than the fear. One afternoon, Mark called me from work, saying he had to travel on business at the last minute. "It's an emergency, honey. I need to go to California now. I'll be back in 2 days, at most." He seemed rushed, and I felt a mix of relief and a pang of suspicion. It was my chance. As soon as he left, I started tearing the apartment apart. I knew it wasn't right, but I had to. I started in his office, opening drawers, rummaging through papers. I found bank statements, credit card bills, but nothing that seemed suspicious. Everything seemed perfectly normal. It was as if he had cleaned up any traces before I got there. Then, I went to the bedroom. I started with the closet, looking for secret pockets, hidden compartments. Nothing. I was about to give up, feeling a lump in my throat, when my eyes fell on an old shoebox, hidden at the back of the closet. It didn't look special, but something told me to look. Opened the box, and my heart pounded. There were no shoes. There was a stack of old documents, photos, and a passport. It wasn't the passport I knew. The photo was of Mark, but the name was completely different. And the passport had stamps from countries he never mentioned visiting. I picked up the documents with trembling hands, birth certificates, university diplomas, all with a different name. And the photos of him with people I had never seen, in places I didn't recognize. It was as if I was looking at someone else's life. Mark wasn't Mark. He had a fake identity, and that meant everything he told me, everything we experienced, was a lie. The betrayal wasn't just infidelity. It was a complete farce. I was in shock. The question, "Who are you, Mark, and why are you lying about everything?" was no longer a question. It was a terrible and frightening reality, and I knew the truth behind that fake identity would be much darker than anything I could have imagined. I was sitting on the bedroom floor, the shoebox open beside me, Mark's documents and fake passport scattered around. My heart was pounding, so hard I thought it would explode. Mark wasn't Mark. Everything I knew about him, about us, was a lie. That charming, successful man who proposed to me under the Eiffel Tower was a ghost. A facade. The photos, the diplomas, the birth certificates, with a different name. It was as if I was looking at a stranger's life. I felt like an idiot. How could I have been so blind? How did I not notice? All those small inconsistencies, the evasions about his family, the secrecy about his job, the lack of social media, it all made sense now. He wasn't hiding a secret. He was a secret. The initial shock gave way to a chilling fear. If he had a fake identity, what else was he hiding, and why? The words, "no witnesses," from his phone, echoed in my mind, and a shiver ran down my spine. I was a witness. I had discovered the truth. What if he found out I knew? I started trembling uncontrollably. The idea that the man I loved was a criminal, or something even worse, was unbearable. I got up, my legs wobbly, and started putting the documents back in the box, my hands shaking. I needed to think, but my mind was blank, overwhelmed by panic. I threw myself onto the bed, trying to breathe deeply, but the air seemed unable to reach my lungs. I looked at the apartment, at the furniture we had chosen together, at our photos scattered around the living room. Everything seemed like a farce, an illusion. This wasn't our home. It was a stranger's hiding place. The night dragged on. I couldn't sleep. Every noise on the street, every shadow at the window, made me jump. I felt watched, even inside my own home. I picked up my phone and dialed my best friend, Lisa's number. I needed to tell someone. I needed help. But before she could answer, I hung up. I couldn't. If I told her, I would put her in danger too. I was alone in this. I spent the rest of the night researching fake identities, about people who disappear and create new lives. The stories were terrifying, full of crimes, escapes, and pursuits. I couldn't stop thinking about what Mark might have done to need a fake identity. Was he a murderer? A spy? A con artist? The possibilities were endless and terrifying. As the sun began to rise, painting the sky in grayish tones, I felt exhausted, but with a growing determination. I couldn't live in ignorance anymore. I needed to discover the truth behind Mark's fake identity. I needed to know who he really was, what he did, so I could protect myself. And the question that now haunted me was, what is the true story behind the man I loved? And will I survive to tell it? I knew the answer would be painful, but I was ready to face it. The morning sun, which once brought hope, now seemed only to illuminate my prison. I was trapped in a nightmare. I had uncovered myself, and the man I loved was my tormentor. The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved, and will I survive to tell it, wouldn't leave me alone. I knew I couldn't just wait for Mark to return. I had to act. My first instinct was to run, grab a suitcase, leave the apartment, and never look back. But where would I go? He would find me. If he was capable of creating such a perfect fake identity, he had resources and contacts. I couldn't just disappear into thin air. I needed a plan that would give me a chance to survive. I started thinking about all the information I had, the words on his phone, delivery, payment, no witnesses, the investment firm, the mysterious trips, the lack of social media, the family that didn't exist, and now, the fake identity. It all fit into a terrifying picture. He wasn't a simple con artist. He was something far more sinister. I needed help. But who? My parents, my friends. If I told them, I would put them in danger. I was alone in this, and the loneliness was overwhelming. Then, I remembered something my father, a former police officer, always said. If you're in danger, collect evidence. The truth is your best weapon. Evidence. I needed evidence that could incriminate him, that could protect me. I went back to the shoebox. I took Mark's fake passport, the diplomas, the photos. With trembling hands, I started photographing each document with my phone. I knew he had my main phone, but I had an old phone, one of those you keep for emergencies. I grabbed it from the back of my drawer, turned it on, and started transferring the photos. It was slow, but I needed to make sure the evidence was safe. I photographed. My eyes fell on one of the photos. It was a picture of a younger Mark with a group of men, and one of them looked familiar. I looked closer. It was the same man I had seen talking to Ethan at the club in Cancun. Mark, Tom, Jake, Ethan's friends. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a coincidence. The two stories were connected. Mark wasn't just a criminal. He was linked to the Order of the Serpent. Panic overwhelmed me again. I had stumbled upon something much bigger than I could have imagined. I wasn't just in danger. I was at the center of a web of lies and crimes that spanned several countries. And the question, what is the true story behind the man I loved? And will I survive to tell it? Took on a new and terrifying meaning. I wasn't just fighting to discover the truth. I was fighting for my life. And the fight was just beginning. My heart was in my throat. The connection between Mark and the Order of the Serpent was the missing piece of the puzzle, but also the one that made everything infinitely more terrifying. I wasn't just a betrayed girlfriend. I was a witness to something they didn't want anyone to know. And they left no traces. I finished photographing Mark's documents with my old phone, ensuring that every detail, every name, every date was recorded. Then, I transferred the photos to a secure cloud service in an account he would never know I had. It was my insurance policy, my only hope that the truth could come out. Even if something happened to me, the adrenaline kept me awake, but exhaustion began to weigh on me. I knew I needed to sleep a little, but fear prevented me. I felt like I was in a race against time. Mark would be back in 2 days, and I needed to be far away, safe, before then. I started thinking about how to leave the apartment without raising suspicion. I couldn't just grab a suitcase and leave. He had deceived me for months, and I was sure he had ways to track me, to find me. I needed an exit that was as trace-free as their operations. My mind began to work in overdrive. I remembered a college friend, Alex, who was a tech genius. He was an ethical hacker, always involved in cybersecurity projects. He was the only person I trusted enough to tell everything to, and who would have the skills to help me. But how to contact him without alerting Mark? I couldn't use my old phone to call him. If Mark had access to my call records or messages, he would know. I needed a public phone, or a burner phone I could buy without leaving a trace. I decided I would leave the apartment early in the morning, before the building doorman started paying too much attention. I would take only the essentials: my old phone, the Swiss Army knife, some cash, and the documents I had photographed. I would dress discreetly, like an ordinary person, so as not to draw attention. The night dragged on. I got out of bed and started packing a small backpack, putting in only what I really needed. Every piece of clothing, every object, reminded me of Mark, of the life I thought I had. It was painful, but I needed to be strong. When the clock struck 5 a.m., I got up. The apartment was silent, the city still asleep. I approached the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. I was about to embark on an unknown journey, fleeing the man I loved, and a secret organization that left no traces. I slowly opened the apartment door, peeking into the hallway. Empty. I slipped out, closing the door behind me as carefully as possible. I went down the stairs, avoiding the elevator, so as not to be seen by security cameras. The lobby was deserted. I walked out of the building, feeling the cold morning air on my face. I was free, but for how long? The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved, and will I survive to tell it, echoed in my mind, and I knew the answer was somewhere, waiting to be discovered. The cold morning air of New York hit me like a shock, but it was a welcome one. I was on the street, free from the apartment, but not from my fear. Every taxi that passed, every person who crossed my path, seemed like a potential observer. I felt exposed, vulnerable, as if a spotlight was pointed at me. My first priority was to find a burner phone. I couldn't risk using Ashley's old phone for too long, in case Mark had some kind of tracker or monitoring. I needed something completely clean. I walked several blocks, my eyes scanning convenience stores and newsstands. Finally, I found a small shop that sold disposable phones. I went in, paid cash, and left as quickly as possible. With the new phone in hand, I felt a glimmer of hope. Now I could call Alex. Alex had been my friend since college, a computer genius, one of those who could unravel any technological mystery. He worked in cybersecurity and was the only person I knew who would understand the gravity of my situation. I hid in a busy coffee shop, ordered a coffee to blend in, and dialed Alex's number. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. What if he didn't believe me? What if he thought I'd gone crazy? He answered on the second ring, his voice sleepy. "Sarah, you okay? What time is it?" "Alex, it's me. I need your help. It's urgent. I can't talk on the phone, but I need to meet you, now." My voice was choked, and I could feel tears in my eyes. There was a silence on the other end. "Sarah, what happened? Are you crying?" He sounded concerned, but still confused. "I can't explain now. It's about Mark. He's not who you think. I found out something terrible. Alex, I'm in danger." I tried to keep my voice low, but panic was setting in. "Sarah, calm down. Where are you? I'll meet you. Tell me where you are." His voice was firm now, with a tone of genuine concern. I gave him the coffee shop address. "Please, come alone, and don't tell anyone." "Okay, Sarah. I'm on my way. Stay calm. I'll be there in about 15 minutes. I hung up the phone, feeling a momentary relief. Alex was my only hope. I looked out at the street, at the people passing by, and the paranoia returned. I felt like a target, waiting for the moment Mark or someone from the Order of the Serpent would find me. 15 minutes later, Alex walked into the coffee shop. He saw me sitting in the corner and came straight to my table. His eyes were full of concern. "Sarah, what the hell happened? You're pale." I started telling him everything, about Mark's inconsistencies, the phone, the words, delivery, payment, no witnesses, about the shoebox, the fake passport, the photos, and about the connection to the Order of the Serpent and what happened in Cancun with Ethan. I spoke nonstop, the words pouring out of my mouth like a torrent. Alex listened, intently, taking notes on a tablet. He asked precise questions, seeking details, connections. He was methodical, analytical, and that gave me some confidence. "Okay, Sarah," he said, "when I finished, this is a high-level operation. Mark isn't a simple criminal. He's an agent, or an asset, of the Order of the Serpent. And the fact that you discovered his fake identity means you've become a problem for them. And what does that mean for me?" I asked, feeling a lump in my throat. "It means you can't go back to your normal life. They'll look for you. They'll try to silence you. You need to disappear. Create a new identity, a new beginning. And I'll help you. The idea of abandoning my life, my career, my friends, my parents, was overwhelming. But the alternative was far worse. I looked at Alex, at his face, and I knew he was telling the truth. But what about Mark? What's going to happen to him? I asked, my voice weak. Alex looked at me seriously. Sarah, the Mark you knew doesn't exist. He's a construct, and the Order of the Serpent leaves no loose ends. If he failed his mission, or if he became a risk, they'll eliminate him, just like they did with Ethan. My stomach churned. Mark would be the next No Traces. The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved? And will I survive to tell it? Now had a new and terrifying layer of meaning. I was in a race against time, not just to protect myself, but perhaps to save the man I loved, even if he was a lie. The revelation that Mark was an asset of the Order of the Serpent, and that he would be the next No Traces if he failed, hit me hard. It was a different kind of pain than romantic betrayal. It was the pain of seeing a human being, even if a liar, in imminent danger. I loved him, or the version of him I knew, and the idea that he would be discarded like an object turned my stomach. Alex noticed my despair. Sarah, you need to focus on yourself now. He made his choices. You need to make yours to survive. His voice was firm, but with a touch of compassion. Asterisk, but what if I can help? What if he, what if he's in danger because of me? I stammered, feeling a pang of guilt. Sarah, if you try to help him, you'll put yourself in even greater risk. And there's no guarantee he wants to be helped. He's part of this. You're not. Alex tried to convince me, but I felt he didn't understand the complexity of my feelings. We spent the rest of the day at Alex's apartment, devising an escape plan. He was incredibly organized and methodical. First, he would help me create a new identity. Not a fake identity like Mark's, but one that would allow me to disappear without leaving digital traces, at least for a while. This involved closing my social media accounts, deactivating my main phone, which Mark still had, and creating new emails and phone numbers. You'll need cash. They can track bank transactions, Alex explained. And a place to stay where no one knows you. The idea of abandoning everything was overwhelming. My career, my friends, my parents. I would have to cut ties, at least for a while, to stay safe. It was an immense sacrifice, but the alternative was far worse. Alex started researching small, isolated towns where I could start over. Places where life was simpler, where I wouldn't be such an easy target. He suggested some options in rural areas of the United States, in states like Montana or Wyoming, where the population was sparse, and privacy was valued as he researched. I remembered something Mark had told me once, during one of our first dates. He talked about a place he went to when he needed to clear his head, a secret refuge in the mountains. He never gave many details, but he described the landscape with a sparkle in his eyes that I had never seen before. It was a place that seemed to mean a lot to him. I told Alex about it. He talked about a place in the mountains, a refuge. He never said where it was, but he described it as an isolated place, with an incredible view. Alex looked at me, thoughtful. It could be a clue. If he has a place like that, it's likely the Order of the Serpent also knows about it. But maybe it's a place where he felt safe, a blind spot for them. He started searching for secret refuges, and mountains in areas Mark might have frequented. The task was like looking for a needle in a digital haystack. But Alex was persistent. The next day, we received news that made my blood run cold. The local news reported that Mark's apartment had been broken into and ransacked. The police were investigating, but there were no signs of forced entry. It was the Order of the Serpent. They knew they were looking for me. Panic overwhelmed me again. I was in serious trouble. And Mark, Mark, probably too. The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved? And will I survive to tell? It now had a terrifying sense of urgency. I needed to disappear, and fast. And maybe, just maybe, Mark's secret refuge was my only chance. The news of Mark's apartment being broken into sent me into a full-blown panic. There was no more doubt. The Order of the Serpent knew, and they were hunting me. That apartment, which was once the home of my dreams, was now a crime scene, a chilling reminder of the danger I was in. Mark, wherever he was also in trouble. The line between victim and perpetrator was becoming increasingly blurred. Alex, with his characteristic calm, tried to keep me focused. Sarah, we don't have time. They're coming. We need to find this refuge. It's your best chance. He started working feverishly on the computer, using programs and databases I didn't even know existed. He cross-referenced information about Mark's travels, the places he casually mentioned, and the descriptions I had of the secret mountain refuge. It was like looking for a needle in a digital haystack, but Alex was a master at it. As he typed, I felt useless, just watching. Anxiety gnawed at me. I thought of my parents, my friends. How would I explain my disappearance? I couldn't. I would have to cut all ties, at least for a while. The idea of vanishing, of becoming a ghost, was terrifying, but the alternative was unthinkable. Hours passed. The New York sun was already setting, painting the sky orange and purple. Alex was sweating, his eyes red from staring at the screen, but he didn't give up. Suddenly, he stopped. I think I found something, he said, his voice hoarse with fatigue, but with a glimmer of excitement. It's an isolated property, in a remote area of Montana. There are no public property records, which is strange, but the coordinates match some of the descriptions you gave me. He showed me the screen. It was a satellite image of a rustic cabin, surrounded by dense forests and imposing mountains. There were no visible roads, only trails. It was the kind of place Mark described, a perfect refuge to hide from the world, and, perhaps, from the Order of the Serpent. This is it, Sarah, it's your best bet. But you'll need to get there without being traced, and that won't be easy. We started planning the logistics. I couldn't take a commercial flight. They would monitor the airports. We would have to drive a long journey, crossing the country, without leaving a trace. Alex would give me a car that wasn't in my name, and teach me how to use alternative routes, avoid security cameras, and switch vehicles if necessary. The idea of driving alone for thousands of miles, fleeing a secret organization, was terrifying, but with every passing minute, the determination within me grew. I wouldn't be a victim. I would fight for my life. Alex gave me a detailed map, with alternative routes marked, safe stopping points, and instructions on how to communicate with him without being traced. He handed me a sum of cash and a burner phone, with a number only. He and I would know. Sarah, you need to be strong. Don't trust anyone. And if you feel you're in danger, don't hesitate to call me. I'll do what I can to help you, he said, looking me in the eyes with a seriousness that made my throat tighten. I hugged him tightly. Alex was my guardian angel, the only person who was by my side in this nightmare. Thank you, Alex. I don't know what I would do without you. That night, I barely slept. The image of the cabin in Montana, the map, Alex's instructions, everything swirled in my head. I was about to embark on a dangerous journey, in search of a refuge that could be my salvation, or my trap. The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved, and will I survive to tell it, now carried an even greater weight. I was about to discover the answer, but the price could be my life. The early morning in New York had a different feel. It wasn't the usual calm. It was a palpable tension, a premonition that time was running out. I was sitting in the car. Alex had provided a discreet model, without trackers, with a full tank and new tires. On the passenger seat, a detailed map of Montana and a burner phone. On my lap, the backpack with the essentials, the Swiss Army knife, the flashlight, cash, and the old phone with the evidence. Alex looked at me with a seriousness that made my throat tighten. Sarah, are you sure about this? It's a long and dangerous journey. If you get caught, there's not much I can do. From here, I have no choice, Alex, I replied, my voice firm, despite the fear gnawing at me. Staying here is signing my death warrant. At least there, I have a chance. He nodded, understanding. Okay, remember my instructions. Use back roads, avoid big cities. Switch cars if you feel you're being followed. And most importantly, trust no one, no one. He gave me one last tight hug, a hug that felt like goodbye. I'll be monitoring the news, anything about the Order of the Serpent. If I find anything, I'll let you know. But you need to be undetectable. I started the car, and the engine purred softly. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, painting the sky in pink hues. It was a bittersweet beauty, a cruel contrast to the terror I was living. I drove out of the city, my eyes fixed on the road, but my mind in a whirlwind. The journey was a mix of exhaustion and paranoia. I drove for hours on end, stopping only to refuel at isolated gas stations and buy food at roadside markets. I avoided eye contact, paid in cash, and tried to appear like just another tired traveler. With every mile I covered, the distance from New York increased, but the feeling that I was being hunted didn't diminish. I switched cars in a small town halfway, following Alex's instructions. It was an old but reliable car that would help me blend in even more. Driving through unfamiliar landscapes, with my mind constantly alert, was exhausting. I missed my apartment, my routine, my perfect life, but that life had become a farce, and I was fleeing from it. At night, I forced myself to sleep in cheap motels, with the Swiss Army knife under my pillow and the flashlight beside me. The dreams were vivid and disturbing. I dreamed of Mark, of his smile, but the smile turned into a cold grimace, and his blue eyes became empty, like a robot's. I dreamed of the serpent and dagger tattoo, writhing and coming to life, chasing me. I woke up sweating, my heart pounding, and it took a few seconds to remember where I was and why I was there. As I delved deeper into the country's interior, civilization became increasingly scarce. Paved roads gave way to dirt roads, and the few houses I saw were isolated, surrounded by dense forests. The air grew colder, purer, and the silence was almost deafening. It was a stark contrast to the noise and bustle of New York, and, in a way, it was a relief. I was approaching Mark's refuge. I followed Alex's coordinates on the burner phone's GPS. With every mile, the anxiety grew. I was heading into the unknown, to a place that could be my salvation or my trap. The image of the rustic cabin, surrounded by trees and mountains, was etched in my mind. Finally, after days of exhausting travel and constant paranoia, I saw it. A narrow trail, almost hidden by vegetation, that branched off the main dirt road. It was the entrance to the refuge. I stopped the car, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath and started driving down the trail, feeling the branches scratch the side of the car. The trail was steep and winding, and the forest closed in around me, creating a sense of total isolation. I turned on the flashlight, and the beam of light cut through the darkness, revealing imposing trees and Muscovite rocks. I was in the middle of nowhere, completely alone, and then I saw it. The cabin. It was exactly like in Alex's satellite image, rustic, made of dark wood, with a stone chimney and a porch that extended into the forest. There was a faint smoke coming from the chimney. Someone was there. Asterisk, my heart skipped a beat. Mark, he was there. The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved, and will I survive to tell it? Now, had a terrifying urgency. I was about to discover the answer, but what would I find inside? Would it be my salvation, or my end? I stopped the car a safe distance from the cabin, the engine still warm, but the silence of the forest swallowing the sound. The faint smoke coming from the chimney was the only proof that someone was inside. Mark, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I grabbed the Swiss Army knife and the flashlight from my backpack, my hands sweaty. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. I approached the cabin on foot, each step on the crunchy snow sounding like thunder in the silent forest. I crept among the trees, using the darkness of the night and the dense vegetation as cover. The flashlight's beam was a faint glow, but enough to guide me. I felt Montana's biting cold, but the adrenaline prevented me from feeling anything but fear. I got close to the cabin and hid behind a large tree, observing. The windows were dark, but a faint light came from inside, probably from a fireplace. I tried to listen, but the only sound was the wind whispering through the trees and my own pounding heart. I needed to get in, but how? The door seemed solid, and there were no signs of forced entry. I circled the cabin, looking for an open window, a secondary entrance, anything. And then, I saw it. A small window in the back, almost hidden by vegetation, was slightly ajar. It was my chance. With the Swiss Army knife in hand, I tried to force the window open further. It took a while, but with a soft creak, it yielded. I slipped inside the cabin, smelling burnt wood and something else, something metallic and strange, that sent shivers down my spine. The cabin's interior was rustic, but cozy. There was a lit fireplace, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. In the center of the room, a wooden table with some scattered papers, and in a corner, an old sofa, with a blanket thrown over it. I turned on the flashlight, and the beam of light swept the room. There was no one. The cabin was empty. My heart sank. Where was Mark? He wasn't there. but the smoke in the chimney. Someone had been there recently. I approached the table, my eyes scanning the papers. They were maps, diagrams, and what looked like reports. And on one of them, I saw it. The serpent and dagger symbol. It was the Order of the Serpent. They were here. I started flipping through the papers, feeling the panic grow. They were surveillance reports, with photos and descriptions of people. And on one of them, I saw my own photo. My name, my address in New York, my routine. They were monitoring me. I was the next target. My blood ran cold. I wasn't safe. The cabin wasn't a refuge. It was a trap. And Mark, Mark wasn't there to save me. He was part of it. Or was he? The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved? And will I survive to tell it? Now had an even greater sense of urgency. I was about to discover the answer. But what would I do now? I was alone, in the middle of nowhere, hunted by a secret organization. I was holding the surveillance reports, my own photos staring back at me, my name, my address, my routine. Everything was there, detailed, as if I were a project, an experiment. The air in the cabin seemed too thin, and my heart pounded so hard I thought I would faint. The cabin wasn't a refuge, it was a trap, and Mark, the man I loved, was part of it. Or perhaps, he was the bait. Panic overwhelmed me. I dropped the papers on the table and started looking around the cabin, my eyes scanning every corner, every shadow. I needed to get out of there, now. But where would I go? I was in the middle of nowhere, in Montana, hunted by an organization that left no traces. I ran to the window I had opened. I looked out into the dense darkness of the forest. It looked like a labyrinth, a place where I would easily get lost. What if they were out there, waiting for me? The idea of going out into the cold and darkness was as terrifying as being trapped in the cabin. I went back to the table, my eyes fixed on the reports. There was more than just my photo there. There were photos of other people, with similar names and descriptions. Target 1, Target 2, Target 3. I was Target 4, and next to my photo, a red annotation, status, discovered, elimination imminent. My blood ran cold. Elimination imminent. They were coming. I had no time. I needed a plan, and fast. I started frantically searching the cabin, looking for anything that could help me. A weapon, a radio, anything that would give me an advantage. I opened cabinets, drawers, rummaged through everything. I found some basic supplies, canned food, water, blankets, but nothing that could protect me from a secret organization. Then, my eyes fell on a small wooden door on the floor, almost hidden under an old rug. It was a trapdoor. My heart pounded. Could it be an escape, or another trap? I knelt down, my hands trembling, and tried to open the trapdoor. It was locked. I tried to force it with the Swiss Army knife, but it was no use. The wood was solid. I was trapped. Despair began to consume me. I was cornered, with no way out. Mark wasn't there to save me. Alex was thousands of miles away. I was alone, in the middle of nowhere, waiting for my end. But then, I remembered something Mark had told me once, during one of our first dates, when he was telling me about the secret refuge. He said there was a secret in the cabin, something only he knew, and that it was for extreme emergencies. He never gave details, but the way he said it, with a sparkle in his eyes, made me think it was important. I started looking for a secret. In the cabin, I ran my hands over the wooden walls, looking for false panels, for hidden buttons. I knocked on the walls, on the floor, looking for a hollow sound. And then, near the fireplace, I felt it. A part of the wall seemed a little looser than the rest. I forced it with my hands, and with a soft creak, a small secret compartment opened. Inside, there was a metal box. I opened it, and my heart skipped a beat. There were no weapons, no money. There was a sealed envelope with my name written on it, and next to the envelope a small electronic device with a red button. I picked up the envelope, my hands trembling. What could it be? A message from Mark. A trap. The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved? And will I survive to tell it, was now about to be answered in a way I never could have imagined. I picked up the envelope with trembling hands, my heart pounding uncontrollably. My name was written on it, in elegant handwriting that I recognized as Mark's. Beside it, the small, electronic device with a red button glowed softly. What was it? A last message? A final trap? I took a deep breath and tore open the envelope. Inside, there wasn't a letter, but a small memory card and a note. The note was short, handwritten, and the handwriting was, without a doubt, Mark's. Sarah, if you're reading this, it means you've discovered the truth, and that I failed. The device is for you. Press the red button only when you're ready to know everything, and to hide. My mind reeled. I failed. What did he mean by that? And what would the device do? Curiosity and fear fought within me. I looked at the memory card. Would that be where the truth he mentioned was? I picked up the device. It was light, discreet, and the red button seemed to call to me. I was in the middle of nowhere, hunted by a secret organization, and the man I loved had left me a cryptic message and a button that could change everything. I decided I needed to see what was on the memory card first. I had my old phone, with a card slot. With my hand still trembling, I inserted the card. I opened the photo and video gallery. What I saw sent chills down my spine. They weren't photos. They were videos. Videos of Mark, but not the Mark I knew. It was a different, younger Mark, in training. He was in a military training camp, learning to fight, use weapons, infiltrate. He was with other men, and in some of them, I recognized the faces I saw in the Order of the Serpent photo. The videos showed brutal training, mission simulations, and Mark, always at the center, excelling. He was a soldier, an agent, an assassin. With each video, the image of the man I loved crumbled, revealing a terrifying truth. He wasn't a common criminal. He was a professional, trained to kill, to disappear. And then, one video caught my attention. It was Mark, alone, in a dark room, talking to the camera. He looked exhausted, with deep dark circles under his eyes and an expression of pain. "Sarah," he began, his voice hoarse. "If you're watching this, it means I couldn't protect you. I'm so sorry. I truly loved you, Sarah, but I'm not who you think. I was recruited into the Order of the Serpent when I was very young. They trained me, molded me. I was the perfect asset for them. My mission was to infiltrate your life, observe you, use you as bait for a larger operation. But I fell in love with you." He paused, and I felt tears stream down my face. He loved me. The betrayal was even more painful now. I tried to warn you, Sarah. I tried to push you away. But they were always watching. They knew I was developing feelings for you. I became a risk to them, and their plan changed. They were going to use you to control me, to force me to do things I didn't want. I couldn't allow that. My heart pounded. He was protecting me. The betrayal wasn't a betrayal, it was a sacrifice. "The device you have," he continued, his voice almost a whisper, "is a tracker, but not a common tracker. It sends an emergency signal to the Order of the Serpent, indicating that you are a target that needs to be eliminated. But it also has an electromagnetic pulse. When you press the button, it will deactivate any trackers they have on you, and it will create a pulse that will erase all digital records of your existence for a few minutes. It's your only chance to disappear." He coughed, and I realized he was injured. "I'm being hunted, Sarah. They know I failed. I don't know how long I'll last. But I wanted you to know the truth. I love you. Run, Sarah. Run, and don't look back. Live the life I never could have." The video ended. I was in shock. Mark didn't betray me. He saved me. The question, what is the true story behind the man I loved? And will I survive to tell it? Now had an answer. The true story was one of love and sacrifice, and my survival depended on me pressing that button. I was paralyzed. Sitting on the cabin floor, the old phone still in my hand, Mark's video playing on a loop in my mind. "I truly loved you, Sarah. Run, Sarah. Live the life I never could have." His words were both a balm and a wound. He didn't betray me. He saved me. The betrayal was, in fact, a desperate act of love and sacrifice. And the Order of the Serpent, they were much more than a criminal organization. They were a ruthless force that turned people into assets and discarded them when they became a risk. The adrenaline that had propelled me there now mixed with a deep sadness. Mark was being hunted, injured, and perhaps already trace-free. Guilt gnawed at me. If I hadn't investigated, if I hadn't discovered, maybe he would still be alive, but then I would also be dead, or worse, a puppet in their hands. I looked at the small electronic device with the red button. It pulsed softly, like an invitation to the unknown. Elimination imminent. The phrase from the surveillance reports echoed in my head. They were coming. I had no time to mourn, to cry. I had to act. Mark sacrificed himself to give me this chance. I couldn't waste it. I took a deep breath. feeling the cold Montana air fill my lungs. I picked up the device, my fingers trembling slightly. I was about to erase my own digital existence, to become a ghost, to live a life I never imagined. It was terrifying, but it was my only chance to survive. I got up, my eyes scanning the cabin one last time. The fireplace still crackled, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. The table with the Order of the Serpent's reports, the evidence of the nightmare I was living. I couldn't take anything that could link me to Mark, or to that cabin. With cold determination, I picked up the old phone and the memory card. I couldn't leave them there. They were proof of what Mark revealed to me, the only way someone, someday, might understand the truth. I put them in the most hidden pocket of my backpack. I approached the window and looked out. The forest was dark, silent, but I felt their eyes on me. They were out there, waiting for me. I could feel it. With the device in my hand, I pressed the red button. A pulse. There was no sound, no flashing lights, just a strange sensation, as if an invisible wave had passed through me. My old phone, which was in my pocket, went blank. The faint light from the fireplace in the cabin seemed to flicker for an instant. I looked at my wrist, at my smartwatch, and it was off. It was as if time had stopped, or as if I had been disconnected from the world. I knew it had worked. For a few minutes, I was undetectable. No one could track me, no one could find me. It was my chance. I ran to the cabin door, pushing it open. The cold forest air hit me, but I didn't feel it. I ran to the car, started the engine, and drove down the trail, without looking back. The cabin, Mark's refuge, was now just a dark memory of a life I was leaving behind. I drove down the dirt road, my eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. I was free, but freedom came at a price. I was alone, without identity, without a past. And the question that haunted me now was no longer about Mark, but about myself. Who am I now, without the life I knew? And will I be able to survive in this new reality, where the truth is my greatest threat? The answer was somewhere, in the shadows of the uncertain future. I was there, in the cave, with the truth in my hands, and a plan in my mind. It wouldn't be easy, I knew. But Mark had sacrificed himself for me, and I couldn't let his elimination be in vain. The Order of the Serpent needed to be exposed, and I would be the one to do it. The question, can truth, however dangerous, truly set free someone who lived a lie, echoed, and I was determined to find the answer. My days in the cave became a training ground. I used the cybersecurity skills Alex taught me, and my own abilities in advertising and strategy. I analyzed Mark's videos, every detail of the Order of the Serpent's training, every face, every symbol. I built a dossier, a web of information that, if revealed, could bring down the organization. Alex helped me remotely, providing information about the Order of the Serpent's operations that he could track, always cautiously to avoid detection. He warned me about the dangers, about their ruthlessness, but also gave me the motivation to continue. I knew I couldn't just release the information. They would find me and silence me. I needed an attack plan that was as trace-free as their operations. I needed a way to disseminate the truth that would be impossible to trace back to me. And that's when the idea hit me. A dark channel. A YouTube channel, like the one you're watching now. A place where the truth could be told, where people could hear my story, without the Order of the Serpent knowing who I was. I would use my voice, my story, as the most powerful weapon against them. I spent months in the cave, preparing every detail. I wrote the script, organized the evidence, created a narrative that would captivate the American audience. I used Mark's old phone, the one he left me, to record the videos, to tell my story. It was a risk, I knew, but it was the only way to honor his sacrifice. When everything was ready, I knew it was time to leave the cave. I said goodbye to my hiding place, the place that protected me and transformed me. I drove to a small town, far from New York, and found an isolated cyber cave with trembling hands. I uploaded the first video, and then the second, the third, telling every detail of my story, my life, the truth about Mark and the Order of the Serpent. The videos went viral. The story of a romance that turned into a nightmare. The fake identity of a man, a secret organization operating in the shadows. The world was shocked. The media began to investigate. The police opened inquiries, and the Order of the Serpent began to be dismantled. I was getting my revenge. I was setting the truth free. But freedom came at a price. I couldn't go back to my old life. I was a ghost, a voice on the internet, a shadow. I lived in constant motion, changing cities, identities, always alert, always vigilant. The Order of the Serpent still had tentacles, and I knew they would never forgive me for exposing them. And Mark. The truth about him was the most painful twist of all. I discovered, through Alex and some leaked information, that Mark had not been eliminated by the Order of the Serpent, not in the way I thought. He had been captured, tortured, and then transformed. He became an even more loyal asset, an emotionless soldier, a robot programmed to serve the Order. They broke him, erased his memory, and turned him into a tool. The betrayal wasn't his, it was theirs. They stole the man I loved and turned him into something unrecognizable. So, the answer to the initial question, was it destiny or a meticulously orchestrated lie? It wasn't destiny, it was a lie. A lie that led me to him, that united us, and that gave me the chance to expose the truth. And that truth, however painful, set me free. I lost the man I loved, I lost my life, but I gained my freedom. And now, I live to tell the story, to ensure that the Order of the Serpent can never operate in the shadows again. I am the voice of truth, and they will never be able to silence me.